We have to press it again. Something didn't work. Oh, an error occurred. Huh.
It says live on my screen.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so it's only on my end that it's saying there was an error. So hi, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the director for the Center for Marketing Solutions at the University of South Carolina, where I teach classes to undergraduates and MBA students in marketing. And we talk a lot about AI in marketing, and we talk a lot about strategic marketing at the university. So today, I am excited. I'm so excited to invite Catherine Jelinek to join us on the show, where we're going to be talking about a platform that she's working on, which I think is incredibly distinct, differentiating, and disruptive, in my opinion. But that's me. But without further ado, Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. I'm really excited to be here. I really appreciate it.
So let's first start off. People don't know who you are, or a lot of people may not know who you are. So why don't we start with having you introduce yourself in terms of who are you and what do you do?
Okay, sure. My name is Catherine Jelinek, live on Bainbridge Island, Washington. I have two young boys, 5 and 3 years old. And my background is not what I expected it to be. I went to school for public policy, but it quickly took a left turn into entrepreneurship. The first work I did, even during college, was all about setting up business incubators, actually, throughout the Midwest. And then when I moved to Chicago and was married to my husband, I met the man who became my co-founder of something new, Raman Chadha, and he had the vision for the Junto Institute that we co-founded in 2012 in Chicago. And that was all focused on emotional intelligence training for startup leaders. And it was also designed as an apprenticeship program. And so we had a beautiful community. Yogesh, you were one of the many mentors and instructors for us. And it was those who had been seasoned and serial executives and entrepreneurs in the Chicagoland area. And they were all sharing their experiences with those who were in the Junto cohort and not allowed to give advice. And you remember that from the sessions, Yogesh.
Yes,
and it was all very focused on tell the story, talk in I statements, not you statements, don't should on anybody else. Make sure that you're sharing the information from how you even got what your opinion would be, what your advice would be, share the background instead, because that arms them with more information to make their own decision.
Yep.
So you can see how that kind of begins to weave into some of the passions I have about what we're doing with the Skinny platform. And I'll fast forward a little bit because my husband and I chose to move out this way for the family stage of our life. The pandemic hit. That was actually kind of perfect to be an early parent during that time, in my opinion, in terms of having babies and stuff, being able to pull back. But I also was doing some really wonderful collaborations during that time that all had something to do with unique transformative programs or conversations with entrepreneurs and people who were creating things. And so this was... yes, this is all kind of my background and how little things connect. And just this past year, actually in March, is when I had a conversation with Dan Heyertz, who is also one of the members who had been a part of the Junto community. And he taught our class on relationship management, an emotional intelligence class. And I had a great conversation with him. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, Dan, I'm still not entirely sure about what I want to be doing professionally right now. And, but I was telling him, I'm like, I do know that I'm devoted to unleashing the power of human connection. And I think that's really paired well with this moment we're in as a culture with AI. As, AI takes over, knowing everything and having all the information at our fingertips and being able to take care of all the details. And, what makes humans rare is our flaws, our mistakes, our connectivity, the fact that we, need one another and grow from hearing about the things that aren't perfect. And so I just find that exciting. And I've also seen the power of that in the other chapters, the chapters of my work life. So that kind of lit something in Dan. And soon after that conversation, he texted me, he's like, my son and I are actually starting a startup. And, can we talk about it? And so here we are today. That startup is the Skinny platform. And it was born out of Dan's experience of desiring to write a book. So Dan's a serial entrepreneur and has had many businesses. Now he does a lot of EOS training and consulting within companies. And that's very meaningful work for him. He's wanted to write a book for the past 15 years. and like many entrepreneurs, doesn't want to write it himself. That's not necessarily natural or where he feels like his time is best spent. So he went through the process of taking a lot of notes, kind of getting frustrated, eventually decided to hire a ghostwriter. And he was even able to find one that was on the lower end of things in terms of price, around 10K, when they're usually like 25K and up,
Mm-hmm.
the entire process. And so he was sitting down and doing those interviews, and the pages he was seeing come from that, that were coming from those conversations, he felt like really didn't reflect his voice or the story that he wanted told. And there was a lot of frustration. How am I going to get this story out? I've been wanting to unlock this story that's within me for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to do this. And his son, Ben Hirt, so they're the co-founders of the Skinny platform. And he was like, Dad, let me help you with this. So they sat down in the woods, and Ben got out, I think, his phone and just recorded the conversation, and he interviewed his dad and asked him to tell his story and pulled it out of him. And it was recorded. And then Ben took that and turned it into, thank goodness for AI, with the audio transcript to text is pretty seamless and high quality now.
Mm-hmm.
And within a week, he was able to give his dad a rough draft that was in his own voice. Yeah. And so that was probably the wow moment for Dan, was how long have I been, banging my head at this and trying to figure out how to unlock this story and how to get it right for myself. And then all of a sudden my son can hand me this within a week. And it was just being able to have that conversation. It was actually a cathartic experience that he enjoyed. It wasn't painful, the moment of like sharing the book. So from that, the idea was born for, can we do this for other entrepreneurs? Can we do this as a platform? And focus on, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I love what you said, because my mind is racing now, because I remember, I just told you before we started on the show that I was celebrating my mom's 96th birthday, but when she had her 90th birthday 6 years ago, I remember spending some time with her, recording a conversation with her about her childhood, because she was living in Karachi, which is now part of Pakistan, but back then it was part of the British Empire. So when India and Pakistan became independent, she was recounting her story about how she moved from Karachi to the Indian side because we were on the wrong side of the border, for lack of a better word, right? So those are memories for her. But for me, it was important to capture that, because it's part of my heritage, right? And I can think of so many families and others who would be wanting to capture memories of their parents, their grandparents, or whatever, and your value prop suddenly becomes super interesting from that perspective. Have you all considered that? I'm just curious now.
Honestly, that's popped into my brain before. And
Yeah.
my husband and I have even batted it around in the kitchen, talking about, wow, this is something that, could be done. And especially for elders, and capturing the stories that elders have. Right now, the focus of the Skinny platform is, entrepreneurs. But I think the concept, what you're getting at, Yogesh, and that I love that Ben, one of my business partners now, Ben and Dan, by the way, I love working with a father-son team. Being a mother of sons, it's really special to me. So, but Ben always says, books are one of the most ancient methods of communication, and there hasn't been a lot of disruption around books. There's been, obviously, Audible and Kindle, but in terms of like the format of a book, there hasn't been a lot of change. And so introducing the idea of a short book, I think is something that liberates the audience and the author in different ways. For me, the fun thing was, so I said yes to Dan, obviously, before I had a chance to read his book. So this is his book. This is how big it is.
Oh, wow.
And they sent me the PDF, and I sat down to just check it out. And I was like, I got to read this. I got to see what this, skinny stuff is all about.
Yeah.
It was like 10 o'clock, and I have young kids, and I wasn't intending to sit down and read a book. I accidentally read the whole book, and I couldn't stop reading it, because the minute I opened it, I was like, it felt like Dan was speaking to me. I could hear his tone and voice right out of the pages.
Right.
And anyone who knows him and gets the book feels the same way. And it's, well, there it goes. but that was incredible. It's like it pulled me right in. And then I sat there and read the whole book and felt really inspired and was excited. There's like a QR code at the end to do the worksheets that he refers to, the process that worked for him in the story that he told. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is really something. And what I was getting at was the disruption for the positives for the reader and the author, right? Like for the reader, I took it all in one sitting. The moment of inspiration was complete. I didn't need to keep coming back to it and have to keep coming back to it and, get through the middle of it and feel like, oh, this is starting to, bore me. I'm not really sure if I'm going to get a chance to finish it. It was quick to the point, and then talked about how, you could do this for yourself. And then also lowering the barriers for the author of not feeling like you need to create some beautiful 250 plus page manifesto with case studies and research and references and all that stuff, just focusing on what's that message that you want to share, and then how people really consider using this for themselves. And that's the base of the Skinny, is trying to lower that barrier.
So there are a couple of different things I want to touch through, right? So and let me just mention the two, and then we can dive into each of them a little bit. One is you identified a gap in the market, and from a strategic marketing perspective, knowing how to identify those gaps and seeing if there's an opportunity there. You guys have found that, right? You talk about the liberation of the author and the reader, the focus, the conciseness of what's being offered compared to reading a 70,000, 80,000 word book. It's heavy reading, right? And there's an entire business model built around that, but there is a different business opportunity and a business model that can be designed in the way you're describing it. So I think that's point number one. We can talk about that a bit more. And then point number two is the power of storytelling and how you've transformed that as well, right? So let's start with the first question around, when you talk about the gap, you talked about the opportunity, you gave the example of how this transpired, right? And you're focusing on entrepreneurs. So talk to me about what have you seen in terms of early signs of success, and early signs of engagement from new authors, or I don't know if you call them concise authors, if there's a new word you're going to create around that, but I'm curious to hear what are you seeing first. Let's talk about that.
Well, for us, our momentum is definitely picking up, and I'm getting busier, and the interviewing is coming on faster, which has been really exciting and really rewarding. The diversity of topics is vast and very cool, so different. This past week, I interviewed an author and did the session where the book comes out. So that's part of our process now, is what Ben did with Dan in the Woods. I now am a part of the team to do this and sit down and have a 3 to 4 hour interview with the author and allow the book to come out and receive that story. And we do one prep call in advance to be aligned in the outline of our conversation. But even similar to podcasts, you go with the flow during it, and all of it is audio recorded and captured and everything. Okay, so I just wanted to place that there. The success, though, we've had 2 books published. One was Dan's, and another is written by Carrie Chesick, and it's behind me as well, Pitch Before Product. So it's actually focused on, it's more of a methodology for sales and marketing teams. And that kind of shows you there's a vast difference between just even those 2 books, because this one from Dan is more of a personal story of through a crisis of confidence and how he got through that. And then this one is, much more tactical business and from the experiences of Carrie Chesick in terms of what he lived through being the CEO of several companies. And it's written in a different tone too. But aside from that, those both did really well in terms of the Amazon bestseller list. And I pulled the stats just so I made sure not to mess that up when talking to you. But Pitch Before Product at its peak was number 3 in entrepreneurship in the sales and selling category, number 10 in entrepreneurship in terms of the market research and business category.
Wow.
Was as number 2 for new releases for the top for several weeks. It was in the top 10. The Noisy Head at the peak was number 6 in the business, health, and stress category, and as high as number 4 new releases for the category for several weeks. So it was fascinating to kind of see that, they're easy to read, easy to buy, and we were really excited about that. Sorry, I'm not sure if I've gotten off track from your question.
No. But what you're saying basically, it goes to the heart of the business model question. That you've identified a gap. you've got early success already, right? With these two books, there is a demand for that because the attention economy, as we call it, right? It's become shorter and shorter, like with things like TikTok and Instagram Reels and stuff like that. So why not for book reading as well, right? So for anybody who's on the audience listening in, who is in the publishing industry, take note, because this is not just a disruption. This is a transformation of what's happening in the publishing industry, in my opinion, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on, because it's that kind of insight that is transformative at the end of the day, right? So so let's continue talking about this. So storytelling. Tell me about the storytelling aspect, because that, I think, is really the heart of the magic sauce that you guys have right now. Talk to me about your examples of what you're seeing right now.
I'm really passionate about this side of the business,
Yeah.
obviously. But I even changed that word to it's not storytelling, it's actually story listening that we're doing.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
Because everybody has that story. And
Hmm.
what I'm noticing too is it's obviously these books that we're doing aren't just like Dan's, where it was like a very human, his story of going through a crisis of confidence. The one I've done just this past week was another one on a sales strategy and a framework around sales.
Hmm.
But it's coming from this author's unique experience of who he kind of has naturally been since childhood,
Hmm.
blended with the professional experiences that he's had,
Hmm.
a moment where he had almost utter failure, and an insight that came from that turned into this framework, and now he's built his own business around it, and it's transformed like several companies and been very positive in terms of like the clarity, the revenue, the impact that it's had on his clients. And it's cool to really like these stories to get into the that arc of how people, what makes them who they are,
Yeah.
and how they found their passion and what they're now doing with it. That entire arc of a story, it's not just about a sales framework, it's about this person
Yeah.
and how they even got to this place and why they're passionate about it.
Hmm.
Um, and so back to the story listening idea is we
Yeah.
all have these things within us, entrepreneurs especially, because there's usually like that something that
Hmm.
they're doing, they're selling, that's pushing them forward, the message they want to bring out to the world, that what they're building businesses around. And I mean, it's my job, but it's also kind of, in my opinion, all of our jobs to have a chance to sit down and really receive people,
Yeah.
to hear what they're sharing, to
Hmm.
realize there's something special inside of that message that's
Yeah.
unlocking something for many companies and clients, and it deserves to be shared. And so it's fascinating to get into how do you really receive a story and allow a person to feel unleashed and unlocked in the story that they have within them, that
Hmm.
that their passions and their experience culminates to have. And then how can you help them birth that? I almost see my role as a midwife.
Well,
Because businesses, I mean, books and businesses, all of those people talk about, and relate it to birth, giving birth to a creative baby of
yeah.
sorts. And in my opinion, up till now, the process of birthing a book has been really awful.
Yeah.
Really hard. Getting back to my computer, having to write more, the discipline it takes, like meeting deadlines, and then having to go become a marketer and get
Hmm.
my 100 friends and all the things. And it's kind of just like a real gauntlet of an experience. And what if it could actually feel wonderful? Like,
Yeah.
what if that process of book birth could feel cathartic and
Hmm.
empowering, and like something was really unlocked during the process of that, not just painful, but
Yeah.
wonderful.
No, I totally get that. And again, like as you're talking, like I can think of so many different use cases, right? Where this could be, relevant. You talked about sales and marketing. You talked about like providing frameworks, the personal aspect of storytelling. I'm even thinking about like large organizations. Like I worked at P&G, as you know. I remember when I started, working, there was a book in my office that somebody had left behind, and I took it home, with me to read it. And it was all about the history of P&G, and being 100-plus-year-old company, they have hundreds of stories, right? And just reading through it to me was like fascinating to see. Oh, like the concept of ivory tower or soap operas, those phrases that we all use, in our you know in our daily lives, originated from P&G, right? But when you read those stories and you're like, oh my gosh, that's how it came, where it came from. Oh my God, like, kind of thing. So I could see that being a huge opportunity there. So my mind is, like I said to you earlier, it's racing right now.
Well, I think what you're capturing with that story and with your mother's story is the idea of there's these stories that are the bedrock for us as humans and as for our companies,
Yeah.
and most of them go uncaptured and undocumented, or if they are documented, they're lost in, the documents behind the company, or
Yeah.
they're not turned into a book to have on the shelf and to be able to share with others. And this actually, what you're sharing, we have had, one author, and the book is in the process of getting published, and it's in the process of its post, first rough draft, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's getting turned into its final product. But one of the authors came to us, and the reason and desire for that book, his book, is to be able to share the story of his company. This company in particular does a lot of mergers,
Okay.
and that's a part of their growth strategy. And he wanted to have a book that he could actually give to companies who were considering potentially
Mm-hmm.
merging,
Mm-hmm.
and allow that book to, you know, they could opt in and opt out, and hopefully save him a meeting and a flight.
Yeah.
And it's been really compelling to do that book, because what we've done is I had the long interview with the CEO, and then also he's had us have 5 of the partners who are from the companies that have merged with the main company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interviewing them as well, and it's just a wide range of those who are almost the most recent merger to those who have been around for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, that's been so cool, because that's kind of what you're getting at, is it's starting to capture the story of a company and its history and
Yeah.
what makes it special. And it's really cool too to get to hear, like, I heard the way that the CEO is explaining the company and its real secret sauce, like the
Mm-hmm.
power of this company is it they are actually putting people and trusting that, like, they want you to be in the role that you're most passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do the thing that you're not passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And genuinely, in a 500-person company with 23 locations, doing that with every single individual and
Mm-hmm.
believing in that, and the companies they bring in, making sure that the teams that are merging aren't like cut apart, and they're plugged in and asked to expand, and make sure you're in the seat that you really want to be in. Like, if you won the lottery, like, what would you choose to do anyways? And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you're running the company, and realizing you don't need as many policies and procedures and oversight and rules. If people are doing what they really want to be doing, they're showing up, and like the growth of the business is rewarded and reflected by that. And so, anyways, it's been inspiring, because then talking to these other partners, getting really detailed stories from like men in their 50s and 60s of how, like, one of them said in the sunset, or the twilight of his career, he feels like he's coming home. And I'm like, this is so cool to get to capture your story,
Yeah.
and to hear this and to hear the reality. Because the thing is, what I'm realizing about each of the authors I've gotten a chance to talk to so far,
Mm-hmm.
I'd call them expanders. Like, all of them expand something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
expand, like this one I'm talking about is like, whoa, you're expanding our view of like the reality of what you can create. Like, a lot of companies talk about having this kind of culture. And then in terms of the stories and the details that I'm able to hear, it's like, you guys really have this kind of culture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is incredible, and it's important for other people to hear about this reality. It
Mm-hmm.
expands your view of what reality is, and then therefore having that idea of what things are possible, it makes it more accessible for you. And each of the authors has done that in some different way.
Yeah.
And I can get into how each one is, but yeah, that's been a cool common thread.
So it's interesting because as you're talking through this, I'm thinking about the fact that, like, we all have our stories, right, of experiences that we've had, or things that that are important to us, and we want to capture it in a way, if so we don't forget. We were talking earlier again about like the aging process, and I think you have a story on that in a second as well. But I'm thinking about the fact that if you want to retain your memory, and not forget things that have happened to you, is this another way to do that memory retention? you know that would be an incredible way to kind of like also think about how you can extend life in a way, because you don't forget your stories as time passes.
Yes, well, I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying, is capturing shared experiences, and it's not just for other
Yeah.
people. Sometimes it's for us to remember the details. It's like journaling in a whole new fashion, like the
Yeah,
impactful and experiences that shifted things for us, like getting those details down and how the story really unfolded and not letting that get lost. There's a lot of value in that. I think that that's what gets me most excited about all of this is each of us is walking around with so many of these kinds of shared experiences inside of us that would be valuable to other people. Why not let these be unlocked? And the idea of shorter books
mhm.
allows more people's voices to be heard in this way.
Exactly, exactly. And so I've kind of like pulled you into other areas, but coming back to the business side of it, right? Storytelling in business is a very big deal at the end of the day. So you've as you've been doing this for the last several months now, what are like your like 3 or 4 ahas that you're capturing with your most recent experience. I'm just curious to hear what you're seeing in that context.
My ahas from like the content that they're bringing forth, or my ahas
Yeah.
from like the process. And
Let's start with the content, and then we can talk process second.
okay, so my ahas from the content. One of the big themes that's been coming up this past week that I have almost witnessed in both this book that's been about sales, the new one has a framework
Hmm.
and really helps you understand your most ideal client. Like that's the big focus of the framework that one has. And
Yeah.
so that book, and then also this one that I'm talking about, where the company is really passionate about making sure everyone's in the seat and the role they really want to have. Um, there's like this building momentum of seeing how things tie together between those two of like, why aren't we all just saying and voicing and being honest with ourselves and others about what we really want? Like
Hmm.
both of those stories actually get down to that.
Hmm.
The one about the sales strategy is talking about how much confidence is lost, momentum and money in companies and in people when we focus on clients who aren't our ideal fit, and how we all think naturally, oh, I actually just want to build my confidence up and kind of go for some of these small fish and then get to this one that I know I really want. But it's like, actually, you might lose confidence and lose momentum if you go for those small fish because they're not a fit for you and they're not looking for you, and what you're selling isn't a match for them. Everything's off. And
Yeah.
so if you keep going in that direction, you might actually pull yourself out of the business. But think about who you really want to be working with, who's like culturally aligned and financially aligned, and go for that blue chip client is the term that this author has.
Hmm.
And things, I mean, you don't necessarily need to work your way up. You can start there. And then similarly with this company, and the story that's being woven and told is like, yes, work in the role that you want to be working in. The
Hmm.
company will do better, you will do better. You do
Hmm.
not have to be doing this other thing. And even when they're acquiring some of the other businesses and talking to the principals or the presidents or the owners, and realizing some of these guys are used to wearing like so many hats and just having their head down in the business for so long, they haven't even pulled it up and really asked themselves, like, what do I want to be doing? What do I
Hmm.
really want? And so that's been an interesting theme to sit with over these two books that are now both in the process of the drafts, moving
Yeah.
forward.
I have a future guest coming in a few weeks, who's an executive coach, and
Mm.
we were talking this week actually, about planning for the show, and it's interesting you said about the people who have their heads down and they're not having the chance to self reflect, right? Because that's an important thing as leaders to do, and the fact that you're tapping into that's really insightful, super insightful, and I hope that when it comes out, I'm curious to see what they have to say on that front. But talk to me about the process. Now, what are your ahas about the process that you've gone through?
My ahas about the process. Um, Well, interestingly enough, is that each book, well, I think you could probably assume this, but each book has its own structure. Like there's
Hmm.
not necessarily one template we're trying to fit them all into.
Yeah.
Book is so vastly different. You were alluding to this, but next week I'm doing an interview with an author and an entrepreneur. He's a doctor, a naturopath doctor, and a
Hmm.
chiropractor, and his book is actually all about testosterone therapy. And so it's been fascinating to see the different corners of the informational universe that I get to like go into. And a big part of this book is going to be about, you know, as human beings, our life extension is, going to be 100 and plus, and we're able to live longer, extending the prime of our life and really asking that question of how can we really be living that vigorous life in all ways, from like our 40s to our 80s at least, right? If we're going to be living so long, really talking about what is the prime of your life, and how could that be decades and decades longer.
Right.
And it's really interesting to dig into that one too. But again, similar to the others, it's a story of a person and their passion in their past and the things that brought them to it. And now this area that, he's really excited about and has had resonance with his customers, clients. So
Interesting.
might have gotten off track from your question.
No, it's you've touched on something, and like the word that's going through my mind right now as I'm hearing you talk about these two examples right now is that you're literally becoming a master storyteller.
Story
Right?
listener.
Or story listener, excuse me, story listener. You're telling the stories, but you're listening to the stories, and you're framing it in a way that makes it compelling, right? So as a story listener, right, there's a skill set there. There's an empathy that you have to showcase or demonstrate to be able to draw that person out and for them to articulate the story in a way that's compelling, that's distinct, that's relevant for the audiences that they're seeking to reach at the end of the day, right? Um, are these things that you're thinking about, or there are other things that you're thinking about as well?
I'm thinking about these things a lot, Yogesh. I think you know me well and enough to know that I'm like I love people. I'm a people
Yeah,
person in general.
yeah.
Um, and so a few things I want to mention. One is I watched a workshop that Dan forwarded to me and recommended I watch. And it was actually one of them. I don't remember his name, and that's bad on my part, but he was a coach to Simon Sinek. And this guy was an interviewer and a storyteller. He was a storyteller. But one of the nuggets that he mentioned that really sank with me as I do this interviewing work is that, there's like these concentric circles when you're interviewing someone. First, like the outside circle is do your research. And especially in this day and age when like there's information everywhere about anyone, like if
Yeah.
you don't do your research, you're being lazy. Like do your research. So a big part of my job has actually been read as much as I can about the authors online, find as much about their material, do my research in terms of like learning about testosterone therapy so that when I'm talking about it, my lack of knowledge doesn't mess up the conversation.
Yep.
Asking the questions that I think our listeners and our readers would ask, but making sure I do a deep dive into the content. So that's the first. And then more interior is finding a piece of connection between you and them. Because then when it's like this, like you and I today, when it's like human to human conversation, it's important to open up that emotional channel between the two people and connect over something in terms of having that opportunity to unlock the emotional connection. And then the story comes out entirely differently, rather than if you never had that moment of building a personal relationship, even just for a few moments, with the author or with another person. It's about really kind of unlocking the emotional field too. The context and the content of the story comes out entirely differently. And I think that that's a big part of story listening. And when I'm saying story listening, I mean storytelling and content marketing. You're posting blogs, you're telling stories about the company. And sometimes it's just telling and sharing. When I'm talking about story listening, it's a conversation between two human beings. And then so that automatically creates an emotional quotient. There's something different than just information being exchanged. And it actually changes what gets shared, in my opinion. Because think about it, if you're just sharing your story and you're typing it out and posting it, it's kind of hard. It's kind of it's a cold box, and you're hoping it's okay. And sometimes you can get into a moment of passion and woof, you shared something great. But there's a lot of like, how is this going to be received? I hope it's all right. And when you're sharing your story with another person and they're receiving it and reacting to it and validating and asking questions, there's that it changes, because somebody in that moment who's sharing a story that's so important to them and is a part of who they are and their history, really getting seen and validated and received for that story. I think that's a huge factor in allowing that story to fully unfold.
That's amazing. I do a lot of work in market research, right? So I just came out of a conference yesterday also, where we talked about qualitative and AI and all that kind of stuff. But, this was the entire audience was qualitative researchers. And, they spent a lot of time talking about, you know, um, how do you capture emotion? How do we do our storytelling? But I love the way you reframed this in the context of story listening, because qualitative researchers are actually listening to their respondents, right, on behalf of their client, and they're capturing all that information. And the fact that, I loved what you said about when you tap into something that there's that emotional connection, it just changes the way the conversation happens.
Mhm.
That's an incredibly powerful insight right there, because oftentimes, what I consider the really outstanding moderators in qualitative research versus those that are not, that's the differentiator right there. That is absolutely, they're able to find that connection, that human connection, or that emotional connection that opens up the door, basically. So it's interesting that you're capturing it, because you're not a qualitative moderator at all, but you are talking about it. So
That's
in your
awesome.
unique way. So I
Awesome.
find that incredibly eye-opening, that it's not just one industry that has a lock on that topic. There's lots of different people in different industries doing the same exact thing. So um,
So interesting.
so tell me, as you're doing this, you're doing the emotional listening. You mentioned AI at one point, and there's a process of AI in your business model too, right? Can you
Mhm.
just tell us what exactly are you doing with that? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Right. Well, the conversation is recorded and the transcript is created through AI naturally. And
Right.
and, and we have a platform for that I think does a really like a little higher quality than what you could get for free.
Right.
And that's the big piece in terms of capturing their voice and
Hmm.
making sure that it sounds like, when I said it, I was reading this book and it sounded like Dan was talking to me.
Yeah.
Like, then that's actually the feedback. So another one of the authors that I already did the interview with, the one that it was about his company, and I've interviewed his partners as well.
Hmm.
And he had also worked with a ghostwriter before and felt like it hadn't captured his voice and was frustrated.
Yeah.
And then his first feedback to Ben after reading his rough draft is like, "Oh, this is my voice." And
Hmm.
so that's really important.
Yeah.
You're going to put
Exactly.
a message out there, you wanna feel like it's you.
Yeah.
You wanna feel like it's said the way that you say it.
Yeah.
And that it even evokes the emotion that you have when you tell the story. And so that is captured. And so
Hmm.
that's a part of the AI. I mean, like, we couldn't be doing that without AI. It would have to be a person who's transcribing it, and
Hmm.
that's so laborious. And
Yeah.
so thankful for AI in that way. And then, of course, AI can help us in terms of quickly checking grammar and making suggestions. So, in terms of the process of the
Hmm.
manuscript and like how that turns into a book, there's both human editors and human formatters, and we also use AI throughout the process to make it a little bit easier and to catch things that human beings sometimes don't catch.
Amazing. And that there's obviously an efficiency play there, of course, but the bigger thing, I think, is that it's a value added play also, because you're able to capture the tone, you're able to capture the the like you said, the voice of the speaker, and be able to see that come through in a relatively short period of time. So you can actually from ideation to launch, I'm guessing you're not that long in
It's
compared
not
to your
that
traditional,
long, and the
right?
longer yes, it's 90 days that we promise from the outset, in terms of the entire process.
Right.
But it could easily be shorter, because the
Hmm.
longer part of it is the very end, and we get a feedback group who, reads the book and gives feedback to the author and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. So it's more of the response times is really what can, slow things down.
Yeah.
But if the authors quicken their responses and feedback on each draft and the process and that kind of thing, yeah, it can be pretty quick.
Amazing, amazing. So, so if you're thinking about giving, aspiring authors that little nudge to progress, what would be some tips you'd give people as they're mulling around with this as a potential place that they want to go, invest their time and effort against?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a tip, but it's just encouragement, I guess. Because I think that one of the barriers traditionally to writing a
Yeah.
book is you think you have to write this whole book and that
Yeah.
you need all of these different points and sections and big things. I mean, I'd say almost every person walking around has a skinny in them, because this is what I'm trying to say is, instead of feeling like you need 5 things that come together in an epic book, you can come out with that one that you already have, you know,
Mm.
pretty framed up in there. And the piece that you knew, oh, I want to write a book and this would definitely be in there. I mean, that by itself, that piece could easily be a short book. And
Mhm.
and what better way to just begin that process of I'm an author now, I can do this, and kind of break that threshold for oneself, and have it not be difficult.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. Because I see, there's so many different public, like publishing houses out there, and I've personally talked to some of them, in terms of, publishing some of the work I've been doing in the last, 24 months or so. And, like I started the process and then I stopped because I was like, I'm not ready. I don't have all the stuff figured out yet. And, you know, is this going to be relevant enough, or is it impactful enough? And self-doubt starts creeping in at that point, and then the whole thing stops.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Oh, and really quick to that self-doubt, that's something that the traditional way of writing a book, that is kind of with an author throughout the entire process. Every time you show up to write or do
yeah,
the, that's there. But the nice thing is when it's this story listening, or when it's a process with another human being,
yeah,
the
yeah.
self-doubt is definitely a lot lower, because you're getting like connection and validation throughout the entire process.
Hmm.
You're getting to hear, to share and be received, and hear feedback immediately, emotional and, content feedback. and
Yeah.
and it's and it's something that kind of like that self-doubt quiets down a lot, and
Mhm.
then the powerful emotion behind the story really comes forward, because that's not dampering it.
Amazing. No, that's inspiring, because I can see myself, progressing, if as a consequence of that. Because I bet you there are a lot of people out there who have thought about writing books and they just haven't taken that step because of all these, they call it mental hurdles on why not to do it, as opposed to why should you do it, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So what about at the back end? So let's say you go through the process. You get the book ready and it's quote unquote published. Where does it get published? Like, you mentioned Amazon earlier. Like, do you all help with that part of the process too, or is it
Yes.
just the
Yes, we do. Yes.
um,
That's not necessarily, that's more of what Ben handles, and I'm handling the interview and
okay,
conversations. And
got it.
absolutely, that is a part of it, like getting it published through Amazon, and it's like an Audible and Kindle and tangible hard copy book, and they're all sold at the price of like $4.99.
Oh,
So they're less expensive books. No author expects to write a book and get rich off of it, which is,
no,
one thing.
yeah,
It's more of the customers, or sharing that story, or, saving yourself those meetings for the author that we've worked with, or, potential
yeah,
speaking engagements and that kind of thing. The expansion of your work is essentially
yeah,
what, and so the idea of, making money off of a book was never necessarily what anyone was going for. But that said, is we're flipping the model in terms of how much you get of your own cut of the book. And right
yeah.
now, 100%. And that might not be the case in the future, but it's never going to be what it is with other publishing
Got it.
houses. Yeah,
I,
it's always going to be fractional. That what we take versus like where the other houses, what the author gets is fractional.
Got it. Got it. Understand. So, as you're thinking about, obviously you're still in the early days of the journey, but you're already starting to build out your own mental model for, how you do story listening, how you do storytelling, because
Mhm.
they're two truly different, activity systems, right?
Mhm.
As you look forward to the next several months, what are your thoughts, in terms of what's coming next for you?
Um, well, I mean, as a business, a lot of different thoughts go through my head. In terms of thinking about what I'm doing presently, I'm the main and only interviewer, and eventually, with the success that we indeed hope to have, will have,
Yeah.
there's going to need to be others, and
Mm.
trying to begin to put into a process, thinking about both the emotional and the tasks related to story listening. And, obviously there's that research, and those can be more text, things that you check off. But then the emotional quotient and hearing someone's story, and being able to tie together things that you're hearing throughout that like 4-hour conversation,
Mhm.
that's a bit of like maybe something natural within me, but it is a part of our company now. And it's important to turn it into a process that you could find others who are able to do this, and then, or train
Mhm.
people to do this. And so it's just interesting. Those are things in top of mind, is really capturing what story listening is and turning that into something that can be repeatable.
Yeah.
And then I think something that's going to occur for us as a company is really getting defined on, the kind of entrepreneur or author we're after, and being able to try and meet those people intentionally. Right now, it's all through our network. And
Yeah.
it's pretty natural, given that Dan Hyatt's especially is, connected through the entrepreneurs organization community,
Mhm.
and has been for decades, and has a lot of EOS clients. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that we're all connected to.
Mhm.
And so that's been pretty exciting. And I think we're just going to do a lot of learning. I mean, it's early enough where like every week there's something new that we're like, oh, this is what's going on with this part of the business. This is how we're doing this. This is a process now, that kind of thing.
I can totally understand that. And I think you're onto something truly transformative in my mind. And I think the fact that you're scaling intentionally, I think is really smart, right? And if you're able to continue doing this, I think you'll open up a lot more, let's say, segments out there besides the entrepreneurship one.
Yes, it could
But
be.
I think it's really smart that you're starting with one and really kind of like going deep in there before you start expanding into other areas. But this is amazing,
Thank
Catherine.
you.
I am so
Thank
happy that you're here and you shared your insights. I am going to borrow the phrase story listening moving forward, because I think that is a really a great reframe from storytelling, in my opinion. So thank you for that. So thank you for being here. This has been truly amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yogesh. It's been a pleasure. It's wonderful to get to chat with you, and then fun to get to sit back. And usually I'm the one interviewing. So it's kind of to be on the side of the conversation and get to share some of the things I'm hearing and thinking these days.
Well, you have a lot of stories of your own, and I know that because we've been friends for a long time. So I know that you do, and someday maybe you'll have your own little skinny book out there too. You know.
Yeah,
So,
I'd love
but
to.
so let me kind of like wrap up the show a little bit. So thanks everyone for joining. Our next episode is going to be on August 8th with Winston Lee from Arima. Winston is one of those smart people that you'll meet who can tell you everything you want to know about synthetic data. So this is a hot topic in the marketing and market research world, at least this year. It's been around for a long time, but at least in the marketing world, it's a more of a recent phenomenon. So I've invited Winston to come in and talk about synthetic data in the context of marketing and market research. So I hope you can join at the same time on August 8th. So thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.